Welcome back to another episode of Boomer Bust. I'm your host, Terry, and today doing a little sidebar talking about super teams in the NBA. So yes, it is the off season for football, pretty slow, doing a little bit here and there, but I want to do some topics off of the Bears as well. So, I am a sports fan. Football is of course my main, sport. I don't follow any sports super closely like I do football, but I appreciate a lot of sports. You know, I try to listen to all the things. And so, I definitely have my opinions about certain things. And one was the NBA, because that used to be, pretty much up there with me for as far as the NFL goes. But, that fell off within the last 5 years or so. And a big part of it was the, super team issue. Now, when I'm talking about super teams, apparently people got all these definitions. I'm talking about what super teams meant when it first started. We're talking about top players, scheming or planning to get together with other top players, so that they can make a run at the title. All this, there were super teams in the 90s and the Showtime Lakers and blah, blah. No. Not what we're talking about at all. And so we're talking about where it started, 2010, LeBron James, Miami Heat. Make no mistake about it. That's the first thing I'm going to tell you. That's where it started. People keep trying to dip and dodge and change the narrative. No, there was nothing on that scale where we had that type of collusion. And so people will talk about the Boston Celtics, where you had Paul Pierce and they made these trades to get these other guys. And in some way, yes, I can understand kind of talking about them being super teams, but the difference is none of them were at their max prime. I mean, you had Ray Allen that definitely was not the player he used to be. Still a great shooter. He just was not, Ray Allen used to be an all-around offensive threat. You had Paul Pierce, who, while still very good, not, a top small forward not a top 5 guy. You had KG, who was the best of them, but still on his way down. And then again, they were traded. And so, yes, I understand as a GM what you kind of pulled off, but as a player, they weren't, out there looking to get together. And that's where this all comes down to. Make no mistake, because when we're talking about how the team was put together and people kind of using it as a definition, fine. But when we're really talking about super teams, the issue comes with competition or lack thereof. That is the number one thing. The mentality of, I'm not going to try to beat the best. I'm going to try to join the best and we can win rings because I just want to win rings. And I understand you want the ultimate championship. When you're a coach or a player or whatever, you should be playing for the ultimate prize, but not to the extent where there's no competition. This is sports, competitive sports. That's what sports is about, competing. It's not about just being there. It's not about just putting a badge on. It's about winning against top competition and earning that trophy or earning that accomplishment. And so, when you get into super teams, we're talking about the mentality of an athlete that does not want to compete. It's anti-competitive, much like we talk about with businesses and monopolies, where we don't want to compete because if there's somebody else out there going against you with equal talent or almost equal talent, that forces you to be more creative, that forces you to work harder, to be better, all those different things to overcome it. And so, when we had this introduction of, why try to face each other? Why try to battle in the East together? Let's just get together. Not only are we going to be better than most teams, but we're going to have now the Cavs and now the Raptors, 2 teams that aren't going to be competitive because we're not there no more. And so we just making it easier for ourselves. And that kicked off this mentality that swept the league and made it for the worse, in my opinion. And so you go forward after what LeBron did, and we saw a lot of teams trying to do that. And people gotta, like I said, you gotta keep the conversation focused because people want to drift off into player rights and free agents and their ability to do this and players having control and wielding your power when you're a top player, because once you're not a top player, no one's going to let you do anything. All that. And I get that, the power of the athlete. But that's not what the argument's about. The argument is about competition. I don't care. I get that. You can do that. You can force to get a max contract, or you can force a coach out, or you could force the team to go pick up players you like, whatever. But we're talking about losing sight of, I want to compete. Now, making a huge jump from the LeBron thing to the Kevin Durant thing. And I like the Warriors. And that's one of the few teams I thought that could work out. But either way, the optics are bad. You're talking about not only joining a team that just won a championship not too long ago, but you're talking about joining a team that won a championship while beating you on the way to that championship. And so you're going to turn around but they beat him the year that the Warriors lost to the Cavs. But either way, they beat you, and you're going to turn around, turn cold, and join them. Now, I've always said that Russell and Kevin Durant don't work well together on the court. Whether they like each other off the court or not, people keep saying different things. I don't care. On the court, they don't work together. And Durant would be smart to leave. I've said that so many times. And then it finally happened. He realized, that type of basketball is not going to get them a win. And just Russell in general, the way he plays, is not going to get them a win. So I was always for him leaving. Now, to join the Warriors, that's where it came in. It's we could spin it as many ways as we want about freedom, about he still got to play LeBron, all that. But the point, you went to the top team in the West, the very top team in the West. And you are one of the top players. You're not Nick Young or JaVale McGee going to the top team in the West. You are an MVP of the league going to the top team in the West. And so a team that's already won a ring together, you're going to come in and add your talent. No one's going to beat you. And so, you pretty much just embody, I think, even a bigger form of embodiment of this anti-competitiveness, because with LeBron, it was one thing, and it's still ugly. Don't get me wrong. It's still ugly. But then Durant is it took it to a whole new level where it's this rings or bust. And the fact is that while we say that as a coach, as a player, and some fans, we want a championship or nothing else. While we say that, that's not exactly all it's about. Because it used to be a time where as a fan, you were happy when your team was always competing. They always were in the playoffs, or they always were getting to the to the conference championship. And you liked that we had a good team because you knew every year at the beginning of the year, this could be our year. And somewhere along the lines, through the media, talking, this conversation around, and I wouldn't say that, I say it's the media, but it's mostly fans too, talking about the conversation with rings. Who's better? Well, count up the rings. And when you got a social media type society, you got a generation that is just plain more sensitive than before, and they're more cognizant of what people say about them. It became this narrative. It started with LeBron. It most definitely started with LeBron because LeBron was being compared to Mike since day one. And so it was always about rings. So LeBron had to do what he had to do to get rings. And then that leaked to other players. Well, okay, when you gonna get your ring, or how many rings you gonna get? And so it didn't become enough to be a great player or to lead your team. You had to get a ring. Who cares? Who cares if you coming off the bench on a stacked team as long as you get your ring? And that was a problem because then it became anti-competitive and just more about getting a ring. And so the embodiment, I think, in the truest form was Kevin Durant running right to a team that just beat him and had just won a ring the year before just so he could get one. And that, I think, I wouldn't say that's where it started because, again, it started with LeBron, but that's kind of the state of the NBA right now. And people talk about the Warriors because there was this whole thing with super team where people tried to skew it to, well, super team just means a bunch of people with talent. No, it doesn't mean that. It means the best player. And again, I talk about with LeBron. LeBron still is the best player. But even at the time, he was even more in his peak. He's the best small forward. Wade at the time, who already had a ring, Wade was a top 5 shooting guard. And then Bosh was a top 5, probably a top 3 power forward. And when you get the teams together, and I'll talk about this in a second, somebody takes back seat. And so people might, in hindsight, be like, oh, Bosh won all that. But Bosh by himself on his own team as the leader was like, had every Toronto record, had a trash Toronto team in the playoffs playing, dragging them by himself. And so he was an absolute star. There's no question. To put all 3 of them together, again, as we talk about the Celtics, where it was like people right out of their prime, on the way out of their prime, but versus the Heat where there's players in the middle of their prime. It's a totally different conversation. And then you're talking about a young team with the Warriors that were winners and that in their own right came together as a champion, adding on a MVP in the middle of his prime. That's a whole new level. And so people will talk about the Warriors again, like super team is a team with a bunch of good players. The Warriors are super team. No. If you really want to break it down and get into that argument about how the team was constructed, then yes, that's what a super team is more about. Because to me, it'd be silly to say the Warriors drafted Steph Curry, Draymond, and Clay. They all end up being raw. Oh, that's a super team. No, they drafted those players. Not to mention they drafted those players at positions people weren't clamoring for. People weren't clamoring for Klay Thompson. People were not clamoring for Draymond Green. Steph Curry was the highest pick, but it's not like he was the number 1 pick. And so you ended up getting a team of players that you felt had this type of talent mixed with this type of situation could work. And I think with Mark Jackson, they were very good. But then you brought in Steve Kerr, as some people say. He brought in a different flavor and things really clicked and they really became big time. And so, no one's going to blame a team. That's not anti-competitive. It's doing your job. Look, if somehow in a draft you could have got LeBron, Wade, and Bosh because people didn't draft them, yes. If the Heat came together or the Cavs came together like that, then yes, no one's going to poo-poo that. That's you doing your job. Great players in your eyes are in the draft. You get them, then yes. But we're talking about leaving teams to join up with other people. Not being traded, but calling them up like, yo, let's get together and play. Now, part of it is spawned off of the Heat doing it and other teams having to respond in kind because there was no other way. But then again, you bring up the Warriors. They didn't do that. They built their team, and now did they know it was going to happen like that? Probably not. But they went about it the best way they could doing their job, and it worked when you do your job right. And so some teams felt like we got to do it. Carmelo had to force himself in New York with Stoudemire. That didn't work out. And then you had, all these people switching teams and trying to do different things. And to the point where we are now, where it's just a pool of talent in certain places. We can talk about what happened with the Cavs and all that, but that was another version. Now look, I made my little own fan-made video about LeBron and his return. I'm not a LeBron fan, but I respect him as a player and I respect his move to go back to Cleveland. But let's call it what it is. That was a super team too. If they didn't have Kyrie Love, if they didn't have Kyrie Irving, or LeBron didn't feel like they had the situation to grab a Kevin Love or another player, I don't know if he would have went back, to be honest with you. But he did do it, and it takes guts to do it. But let's be honest, they set up another super team. Again, same thing. People are so caught in the moment. You can say what you want about Kevin Love. Kevin Love was a absolute top 5 power forward, hands down, a monster. And so you went and got him. You had Kyrie, who you knew was a star, and you created another triple threat super team. And so it just happened in cycles that after the Heat did it, people had to keep doing it to respond. And it turned the league into a point where it was like, well, if I want to win something, I have to join the super team. My hand is being forced. If I'm not on a team with 3 stars, then we're not going to be able to compete with these super teams. And so a lot of people, I'm not really blaming them. Like, okay, John Wall, he's been in Washington the whole time, thick and thin. It's not like he ran off to go do something with another team. And I don't know, maybe it's the money. Maybe he is like, you know what, I'm loyal and I'm going to compete. Or maybe he's like, I don't have a situation that fits me where I could go super team up. Who knows? So I'm not going to praise him, but he's an example. There are people that have not done that. But for the most part, there are people that have done it, and I can't blame them because it's what LeBron set. It's the standard that he set. It's the bar that he set. And a lot of teams had, or at least they felt like if we're going to win, we have to join the trend. And so Warriors came along, and for me, it felt great. It felt great. I like Mark Jackson. I really like Clay coming out, and I love Draymond coming out. It's funny, those two I actually knew in college, watched them, and I thought they were going to be great. And then Kerr, of course, a Bull. I love him too when he took the job. And then they happened to explode. And I'm like, you know what? This is going to change the game because you beat teams and you're winning championships with homegrown talent and supporting pieces. This is finally going to wake people up. But then you go and get Kevin Durant, and it absolutely went from point A to point Z. And so now not only are you the model for homegrown team, you're the poster child now for super teams. And whether or not they built the super team, before Durant, once you add an MVP to a championship team, it's only going to send one message. We got to ante up because nobody else has 3 stars out of the draft. And I think people just kind of ignore the question because, again, people will say, well, what do you want them to do? What do you want them to do if these super teams, how are they supposed to compete? And I'm like, draft good players, whatever. And people will keep telling you the stars come in the top 3 or the top 5 or whatever. There's not a lot of talent after that. And so people keep taking that as the answer, but that's not an answer. That's just the surface. People take that and say, okay, there's not a lot of talent in the draft. We can't replicate that. Well, then no one's asking the real question of why is there not talent in the draft? You talking about the NBA or the NFL that does 7 rounds and you get these stars all over. But then we turn around and talk about the NBA and you can't find talent past pick number 7. That's an issue. That's the question nobody's really talking about. Now that goes back to the G League and developing players and all that stuff I talked about before. But that's the real question of why can't you build through the draft? That tells you something else. Now, me personally, I don't watch basketball rarely at all anymore because not so much the super teams, but I think the game is bad. And that's a whole nother issue that kind of ends up happening with super teams because when you get talented players, they're so rare that people have to conglomerate together because, a team's not like, oh, we can go and get a piece in this next draft. No, I can't get a piece in this next draft unless I tank, which is a whole nother question. So the bigger question over everything is why is there no talent in these drafts? Now, getting back to super teams though, it spawns a lot of issues. Tanking, one of them. And, other super teams, of course, another thing. But at the end of the day, the question is, does super teams hurt the NBA? I say unequivocally yes. People are telling me the ratings have never been higher and that we never had more stars in this league. I don't believe that whatsoever. I 100% don't believe that. Where are these stars at? I grew up at a time where, and of course, most of you Chicago fans, we talk about the Bulls, and people say, well, they won all the time. They were a super team, or there was no parity. There was parity. There's a difference between going into series and winning them by battling, and going into series and winning them when there was no question. So hindsight, yes, we can say they won that, they won that, they won that. But at the time going into these series, nobody, or I wouldn't say nobody, but the majority of people weren't like, it's a lock. Like, yes, we felt pretty good, but a lot of the teams, the bigger name teams, like the Magic, when they were coming up, or not the Magic, but the Magic were on the uprise, and they weren't easy. But then you talk about the Knicks, the Detroit before, we got over the hump. Like, a lot of these teams, it wasn't no lock. And then when we played the finals, it wasn't a lock either. And so while, yes, Jordan won all those games in hindsight, at the time, you had to tune in because you had to see how they were going to win, how they were going to battle. It's not the same now. Like, I don't feel any pressure to tune in when the Warriors play in the playoffs, or the Cavs, or anybody else. Now, this year the Cavs fell off, of course, but in the past, when LeBron was with a team, I didn't feel a need to tune in because you knew one way, by hook or by crook, they were going to end up in the finals. Like, book it. 100% book it. There is no surprises. And so this year it took a whole rebuilt Cavs to have some drama with the Pacers. They didn't have any drama after that, but then Boston. And so, but when they're at full strength, and when the Warriors, of course, are at full strength, there's no question. There's no reason to watch. It's not competitive. I've watched the Warriors, like, I'm serious. The last few years, I've only watched the finals. This year, I watched Warriors, Rockets. I didn't even watch Cavs, Celtics, which I could have. It went to Game 7, but I didn't think it would. And so I watched Rockets, Warriors. I'm going to watch a little bit of Warriors, Cavs, especially since it's on the local channel. But overall, I'm like, I'm going to watch Rockets because that's the only team that got a chance at beating the Warriors. Other than that, there's no reason for me to watch. It wasn't like that back in the day. And even if a team wasn't good, it's going to be a battle. So, like, LeBron and the Cavs go up against Toronto in the first round or whatever, you might say, okay, yeah, the Cavs got it, but you're going to watch because Bosh is going to do his thing. I mean, same thing back with Jordan. Like, you going to watch the Cavs, Doherty and and Harper and those guys, they going to give them a test. The Knicks, you and them, they going to give them a test, and it could be their year. The Magic, Shaq Fu, it could be their year. But even though we know, or we believe the Bulls is the much better team with Jordan, we got to tune in because it might be another team's year. It's none of that now. There is nobody else this year. It's only the Cavs and the Warriors. And I think as much drama as we got this year, it only proves the point even more that even when it all goes wrong, the Cavs and the Warriors end up in the finals. And so, super teams just have taken the importance of the regular season out. I mean, both the Cavs and Warriors weren't even the number one seed. They're sending guys out during the year or whatever, talking about we're resting for the long game. Like, the regular season don't even matter no more. And then the playoffs definitely don't matter, even if it's a 7-game series and it's a opponent learning you and adjusting. It still don't matter, really, at the end of the day. And so, it's just, there's no, for me, and for people I know, there's just there's no urgency to watch basketball like it used to be. I mean, even in football's different. It's one and done. And so, but even still with that, football, there's enough talent and there's enough moments where a person can step up that can change an entire game. Basketball in these 7-game series with lopsided super teams, there's no real chance that you feel like another team is going to beat them. So, I don't know. For me, I think, like I said, super teams have hurt the league in many ways. I think soon I'll talk separately about the draft. I'll talk separately about tanking and all that. But we all know those are some of the symptoms of super teams, and that it has caused teams to either push all their chips in or take all their chips out. And it has caused players to, kind of go join up. And at the end of the day, it doesn't make anybody better. We already know how it went. And it's one of the oldest things we say. There's only one basketball. We know how it went with the Heat. Yeah, Wade still could do his thing. LeBron was the top dog, but Bosh became an afterthought. Look at the Cavs. Kyrie was still trying to do his thing. LeBron was the guy. And then Kevin Love became what he is now. And we see it with the Warriors. Draymond's numbers changed. Like, the high volume that the Warriors get has helped keep Klay Thompson's numbers up. But it changes. The dynamic changes. You can't split it any other way. Once you put those many stars together, somebody takes a back seat. Somebody takes a middle seat, and somebody stays the alpha. And so, not only are you getting anti-competitive, but then you're taking away stars. So when people keep saying we got so many stars, I'm like, where are they at? And I think you could. If we, could sit here and say we got a Greek freak here in, Milwaukee. If we had whoever in Chicago, we got LeBron over holding it down in Cleveland. You got, Oladipo, which, another good example, Oladipo kind of getting away from, Russell and them shadow and becoming a star again in Indy. You got Klay Thompson, if he left and said he got him here. And we got Durant left and he's here. And you got Steph holding this team. That's how it used to be. You used to have so many talented people. It spread throughout the league for the most part. And I'm talking about teams that didn't even make the playoffs. There were still teams that were okay, they had a reason to watch. It's not the case no more in the league. And, it's real sad. So, anyway, I could probably talk about super teams for a long, long time, but that's just my 2 cents. I don't think it's good for the league. I think it has caused a lot of problems, and I think we're going to come out on the other side of this. Kyrie Irving was something brewing. I said this, and people didn't believe it because we don't believe competition is real. Everybody, why would you leave LeBron? Why would you not want the easy route to the finals? Because hopefully there's still athletes that want to compete. And Kyrie showed that. Now, I know that Gordon Hayward was there, and it was a mini super team itself, but he didn't really say, I want to go to Boston. He said, I want to get out of Cleveland. I don't want to be here with LeBron. And so, hopefully we start seeing players, even if I think the Warriors going to win, I think you're going to have guys like Durant that realize, winning is not that sweet when you didn't have to work hard for it. And so, I think we're going to come out on the other side where players are going to start to want to compete and lead their own team again, especially as the old heads. Because the old heads, basketball players, they talked about this ring stuff. You got a ring. How many rings you got? But now it's starting to talk about, okay, you got a ring, but what'd you do for the team? Or how'd you lead them? Were you the main guy? And so they do have influence. Michael and all those guys, Barkley, Shaq now, they got influence. So I think it's going to turn the tide slowly. And we will get back to a day where people are spreading out and they trying to claim their own team to lead to a ring instead of let me join up with whoever so I could get an easy ring. But go to the comment section. Let me know what you think about super teams. Are they good or bad for the NBA? Thumbs up, subscribe, get the convo started, and thank you for listening.